welcome everybody. Okay, we have 3 minutes left, but I can at least welcome you. Thank you very much for your interest, for your enrollment, and wish to follow the very upcoming, inspiring, and very useful lectures by Dr. Thomas Irmer. I will make a short introduction by reading an extract from his biography. Mr. Thomas Irmer is born in 1962 in Potsdam. He lives and works in Berlin. He is based in Berlin, as I said, as a scholar, dramaturg, theater researcher. He is critical who regularly contributing to Theater der Zeit. It's a German theater magazine. Then Slovenian theater magazine Maskar. Polish theater magazine Didaskalia, and Shakespeare theater magazine in Norway. He has also worked for various international festivals from 2003 till 2006 as dramaturg for Spielzeit Europa, Berliner Festspiele. Then at the theater festival Bošnikovo Srečanje Maribor, Slovenia. Then his recent books as author are Andrzej Wirth, Flucht nach Form, published in 2013. Then Maria Steinfeld, Das Bild des Theaters, 2015 published. Then the book Castorf, published 2016, and Perceval, published in 2019. He's member of ITI Germany, and he has very rich academic career, including professional career, and he is artistic and theatrical author involved in co-directing the 4 documentary films in theater, the Bühnenrepublik Theater from 2003, then European Pieces, New Drama from Europe in 2004. Born 1968, theater artists look back to their careers from 2008, and Heiner Müller, a biographical portrait documentary film from 2009. So I'm inviting Dr. Thomas Irmer to start his lecture, interpretation, reflection on the topic Festival Culture, History and Perspectives Beyond Corona. Please, Thomas, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Everyone can hear me clearly. I can see some of you. Sometimes with split screen, it's a little bit irritating. But for me, it's also a premiere. So it's the first time that I do something like that, like an online lecture in front of the camera. I will read mostly from the screen next to this. So I will ease into another direction, so don't be irritated by that. And of course, Ivanka has given a nice introduction. I want to add that we have a question and answer session afterwards, and you can prepare for that. Yes. Now I see even Thomas. Okay, so the first acquaintance among these screens. And yes, well, when we planned this about 3 months ago, we were going, of course, for business as usual. And it meant that I would give a survey lecture on festival culture, theater festival culture, as it grew out of history and what kind of perspectives it would have. As you know, of course, this has been severely disrupted by the first Corona crisis, and this happened at a very moment when theater internationalization had become a very important aspect of the development of theater in general in many European countries and cultures. So, of course, there are gradual differences. Some countries in some countries it was less, but one could state for a beginning that festival culture was a driving force behind this phenomenon of internationalization. The lecture will explore its history and discuss also questions of the future of festivals. which may be uncertain, but the question of internationalization remains as important as before, I believe so. Yeah. So even though we see this much endangered at the moment, that we will have not much traffic, there is not much exchange possible, and things like that the corona crisis will severely affect the whole field of theater internationalization. But it may change very soon again. Yes, and it's of course a little bit of speculation. And so my structure will be that I give you like an introduction to the German situation, but with sort of flashbacks or retrospective to the general history of festivals, and I will explain a few of them, and I also will explain like a cultural pattern behind festivals. And doing so, you might, take your questions for further on. And yes, so in part I will, give you explanations. In part I will read from a script, so it goes back and forth. And I will also give some signs into the camera, yeah, of names and titles that you might want to catch, which is not so easy when you just listen to a speech. So by mid-March, like almost everywhere else in Europe, theaters in Germany were closed for the public. A few more days remained for rehearsals before complete shutdown. And I think this was the case in most of your countries, and maybe with a difference of a few days here and there, but in general, the mid-March time scale of Corona started then. Exactly on 16th of March, the Berliner Festspiele called off Theatertreffen as the first big event killed by Corona and as the first important theater festival in Germany that was, called off. Upon which the whole festival season, stretching even into this fall, yeah, was disappearing from the calendar of events. And now I name a few of these festivals that were already prepared and had budgets and everything, had many international links. So I made this selection of festivals according to the issue of internationalization. For example, there were the festivals in Mülheim and Heidelberg. Those were festivals devoted to new drama, or Heidelberg also with some international programs. This year it would have been from Lithuania, as they always have some guest country, and they usually take place in May. They were called off very soon, followed by the very famous Bayreuth Festival. There you could also see one aspect. They had no time, not enough time for rehearsals to complete productions. Then there was an international festival that takes place only every third year in Germany, but wandering around from city to city. That's Theater der Welt in Düsseldorf, a very international event, and it has been postponed to next year. So that's another option that festivals would do. Just to cancel it is one thing, but maybe to find another solution for bringing out the edition sometime later is another option. Other festivals like Ruhrfestspiele were cancelled as well, and more recently, even the likewise famous Ruhr-Triennale, which is a special case because Ruhr-Triennale only starts at 14th of August. So we're speaking about the the near future, but still there's a lot of time, and it would have presented its program until 20th of September. So this might look like that the whole festival season was cancelled, maybe in advance or an expectation of a much more serious situation in terms of the pandemic. But we have quite some discussion about why festivals would cancel so far into the future, like Woodtriennale being a special case for this, because Woodtriennale does not take place in regular theater buildings, but in very special venues of former industrial sites, and also like coal mines and steel factories. So there's plenty of space, and this question of spatial reorganization for the audience and for performances is very much the issue of how we will organize such events in the future. Yeah? So a festival that by definition takes place outside the regular venues might have other options to go for the rules of distance, for example, and also like to organize like the movement of the audience, to get in and out and things like that. So these are maybe only practical questions, but they are very important for the maintenance of festivals now. And as I said, Woodtriennale would be very much a chance, to show how a theater festival with lots of international performances can be organized in a different way because of other spatial opportunities. And it may be unjust to take these well-funded flagship festivals in Germany that I was talking about for the whole of German theater. So this can be very unjust, but their cancellations were the most visible and drastic acts connected with a perspective for theater culture altogether. So I take these festival calendar as a token for the whole, as a token for the whole, and also that we can see maybe much better than in the example of smaller theaters, in smaller places, but what happens to the festivals and their international programs, of course, is in perspective here. Now, let me make the first flashback to pave the road historically for where festivals came from originally. Yeah? And of course, the historical roots of theater festivals, they are in close connection with festivities in ancient times. And it goes back as far as like the 6th century before Christ in ancient Greece, where they had like the spring festivities for Dionysus. These were not theater yet in our understanding, but they were like dances and singing, usually in a grove, and so it was religious rites, and but it was also like official holidays in this what we can understand as ancient Greek state unit, so to speak. And this was maybe, or should be seen as the very origin of what we have as theater festivals. In the course of time, after these festivities for Dionysus, they became in a way urbanized. So they moved from the grove, in the woods, into real theaters, real theater buildings, into true venues. And in the 5th century, it was like a blooming culture, and those festivals that used to be the festivities for Dionysus became now a competition of playwrights. Yeah? And this is where we have, of course, the best known playwrights of that period, Sophocles and Aeschylus and Euripides. And they had like this festival organized as 3 days in a row, and each day you would get like 4 plays, and this makes and then they would have a fourth day for the comedies, which makes 4 days of theater in total. So people had free access to that, free admission, not only free access but also free admission, and in a way they were expected to attend them. Yeah? So it was like their obligation as citizens to attend theater. So these people of those times, they would see 17 new plays with each edition of these festival. And yes, so of course this sounds like very improbable for us, that they had the capacity to see 17 plays in a row. Maybe only some of us festival professionals can do that. But I think it's important to understand like these origins of festival practice, they already shape the patterns of events that we know as theater festivals today. And what you have then, so I make a big leap into the 19th century. For example, in 1876, the composer Richard Wagner, founded his own festival in Bayreuth, the Bayreuther Festspiele, and it was pretty much oriented to that practice of ancient Greek festivals. As I said, Bayreuther Festspiele are also called off. They have another system, so they number their editions and they simply said, okay, no edition this year, and what would have happened this year will happen next year. So they just, postpone everything by 1 year into the future. Another source for our type of theater festivals comes from the Baroque period, and from the festivities in the Baroque age. There, among other things, theater was seen as a representation of symbolic world order. Yeah? The theater was very special, was central in these festivities of the Baroque age. Of course, it was like for the court, it was for the gentry, it was like for the royal society, so to speak, and it was for celebration of their own power and was for the representation of their power. So Baroque culture might be very distant from us, but the idea of how they organized theater and then also opera, as it was quite new, is very close to us by contrast. And they had like the idea to have such festivities over a period of time, over days, maybe even weeks. So that makes it special. And what is also interesting about the Baroque festivals is they were not just dedicated to one genre, like the Greeks had their tragedy and comedy and theater in the first place, but the Baroque festivals also would include like dancing ceremonies and even fireworks. Yeah, so fireworks were a special art form in the Baroque period, and they could be added to the theater of symbolic world order. So if you want to get to know more, there's one idea of literature, I tried to use this for you, Richard Alevin. So it should be in English and in French. I have the French title here, the L'Univers du Baroque. And this is maybe the best book also in the context of the research of festival culture that we can use here. Again, so we have two time shifts like the ancient Greek and the European Baroque festivals, but they somehow have shaped our ideas of the modern festival as we have it. And now I will give you a number of those festivals and also like the reasons why they were founded, why they were developed, and what was the story behind, because it's also interesting to see how festivals have their initiation, and that might change in the course of time the reasons why they were initiated. The best example, and we have exactly the 100th anniversary for that, is the Salzburg Festival, Salzburger Festspiele. The Salzburg Festival, it was founded in 1920, and they would have the anniversary edition now, and in fact, they have not cancelled the whole. They will have a reduced festival for this end of July, the first half of August, but they will have the real anniversary edition next year. Now, look at this, why the Salzburg Festival, which of course is one of the best funded festivals in the world, why it was interesting to look at its foundation. It was in 1917, Max Reinhardt, the Austrian-German director, along with the poet and playwright Hugo von Hofmannsthal and the composer Richard Strauss, who wrote some of these famous operas, they developed the idea to create a festival in the Baroque town of Salzburg. So here we have maybe one link to the Baroque culture, as Salzburg as a whole town is a Baroque work of art. If you have been there, you will remember clearly why. So, but in 1917, it was the last year of the First World War. And these three artists, Max Reinhardt, Hugo von Hofmannsthal, and Richard Strauss, they developed the idea, once this terrible, devastating war is over, we want to create some cultural activity that brings people together for the idea of, the celebration of life, but also like to leave the war behind and to bring out a festival, that would, celebrate culture, the best of culture after this war. So, what I mean is like the foundation idea for the Salzburg Festspiele were connected with the First World War. Therefore, we have its foundation year as 1920. Then Max Reinhardt said the best from the best. Yeah, so this was the programmatic for the programming. The best from the best. They started to produce, of course, their own work. And then there is this Everyman, which was rewritten from a medieval mystery by Hofmannsthal. So it's an open air event. It takes place every year. Now it's said it should take place as an open air theater event in this year. So Austria can be a little bit different from how they treat the corona crisis and culture and theater. However, I want you to understand that this idea of modern festival starts with the Salzburg Festspiele after World War One, and its origin or its original idea is very much connected to what happened in real history. So it was not just let's make a festival, but there was a historical context for this, and I think this historical context was very soon forgotten. So it was not so important to remember why the Salzburg Festival came out of the wastelands of World War One, but it was important to remember that it was in Salzburg and that already created its own strong tradition and so on. And I think this pattern, that the original idea for the foundation of a festival is forgotten and gets lost, holds true for a number of other festivals too. And it's interesting to see the pattern behind it. Yeah? For example, if we look at the foundation of international festivals, that they are international by nature, we would start looking at the Festival of Edinburgh in Scotland. It was founded in 1947, and it was defined as an international festival and for international exchange from the very beginning. Again, you have, like the Salzburg Festival, you have the Edinburgh Festival 2 years after the Second World War. And of course, it's also related to the experience of the Second World War that, should make like an international statement or a statement of internationalization with theater. Of course, when you go to Edinburgh today, or when you deal with it or read about it, you would not think of the Second World War in the first place, but it was the original idea behind it. Yeah, and of course, the Edinburgh Festival is maybe the largest one in the world, and nobody can, encompass what's going on there. So it's very difficult. It's like the festival catalog is like a phone book now, and so it seems very strange or very difficult to go into the whole structures of that festival. Let's see what happens with this festival this year. Actually, I don't know at the moment how they will do it. Most festivals went online, and I will talk about that also very soon. But let me give you another example for the international festivals in relation to their foundation idea, and that's of course Avignon. Yeah, Avignon also founded in 1947, 48, but it was even more than Edinburgh. It was really inspired by the activities of UNESCO and United Nations. Yeah. Here you have even the close connection between political ideas of an international organization and the foundation of this festival. Avignon, of course, has also been called off this year, so the French government could not, open the gates for Avignon. Let's put it that way. But if you look at these three big European festivals, Salzburg, Edinburgh, and Avignon, you see their relation to historical events that get lost afterwards in the course of history. We don't know what it means, what the situation means in which we live in right now. I mean, the Corona crisis is certainly not the idea to create new festivals, but rather to encounter the challenge to maintain them, to keep them what we have. And this will be our challenge for this historical moment. And as I'm saying this, I want to talk a little bit about some of the German festivals, along with the idea why they were founded. Of course, most of you know the best known theater festival in Germany, which is Theatertreffen, which features or presents the 10 best productions of the previous season from German-speaking countries, which means German-speaking Switzerland and Austria, along with the whole of Germany. So this festival is like a ritual. It was founded in 1964 in Berlin, which means in West Berlin. And here you have again the historical pattern of historical circumstances that inspired the idea of the festival and gets lost afterwards, because the Theatertreffen, of course, was very much an idea of the Cold War division of Germany. It was West Berlin was very much isolated, being surrounded by East Germany. So it was like an island, but formally it belonged to West Germany. So they decided, let's put a festival of the best theater into West Berlin in 1964, which means it was 3 years after the Berlin Wall was erected. So here again you have a very close connection to history, for Theatertreffen. Now, if people read about Theatertreffen or attend Theatertreffen, nobody remembers this. Nobody thinks of the Berlin Wall for Theatertreffen, but it came from that. It was like Salzburg was coming from the First World War, and Avignon and Edinburgh from Second World War. Theatertreffen came from the Cold War, which makes it very interesting in the context that I will pursue here for other festivals as well. Let me give you a few more examples. Then we have the Mülheim Festival for New Drama. Mülheim in the western part, let's say in the greater Düsseldorf-Cologne area, to give you an idea. It was founded in 1976. This time we have no big historical event, but the blooming of new drama, from the mid-60s to mid-70s, there was a constant blooming of new drama in German-speaking countries. It is related to the names of Peter Handke, the last year's Nobel Prize laureate, to the names of Thomas Bernhard and Heiner Müller, and so on. I'm talking about that tomorrow in detail. But Mülheim had a very specific agenda to present only new drama. Why I'm choosing this is that we have also a differentiation, a specialization of festivals, beginning in the 70s. So there are now festivals with special agenda, there are festivals with special programs. So it's not just theater as such, but they have new drama. There might be dance later on, and there might be, for example, like theater from the independent theater scene. There is one, it's called Impulse Festival, like Impulse Festival. It was founded only in 1990, so this specialization was belated as a sort of arena for independent theater, like a Theatertreffen for independent theater. So it was curated, it was like, not exactly with a jury, but usually they have a curator. But what you can see here is the specialization of festivals. And then what else? We would have, and here we have the next type related to historical events is all the festivals basically all over Europe that were founded after 1990. Yeah. So this 1990, of course, was like the end of the Cold War, and the idea was now there's a unification of Europe, or let's say open exchange between many different cultures possible, basically almost without borders, but also with a growing interest in one another. That's very important. And there's one festival that was called A New Place from Europe. It was founded in 1992. So here again you see close relation to the historical event of 89 and 1990. And the idea was to create another type of festival. Yeah? So which means the exchange of new drama in a very large community of theater people. So there were, first it was in Bonn, the former capital of West Germany, where it started, this New Place from Europe. And it was on the initiative of the artistic director Manfred Ballhardt and one of the well-known playwrights, German playwright Tancred Dorst. They researched all these productions all over Europe and invited them, and it was like a new form of, getting to see new drama before it was, on Broadway or in West End, or before it has some sort of critical evaluation. It was like really the exchange of the newest and in the field of drama. And I think that was also became a flagship for many other festivals in other countries as well, who would, put on new ideas for the development of new drama. Especially when you have a theater culture where contemporary drama is not so strong, such festivals can make a big difference. To propagate the idea of new drama, and also like to see how it is, done, how it is made in other countries. So for the 1990s, it was very important for the breakthrough of the new British playwrights, this Biennale in Bonn. But it was also important, for example, for the exchange from new voices from ex-Yugoslavia, for example, like Biljana Srbljana, which was very much like a child of this festival, or to discover, to give you a completely different example, or how the Jon Fosse from Norway was discovered with his plays. So here you see the function of such new drama festival is very well defined and can have lasting effects on other theater cultures. Now, to look at the New Drama from Europe Festival under the circumstances of Corona, it has not been scheduled for this year as it is a biennial, so it would take place next year. So there is no loss on that side. But of course, the loss altogether is quite severe. Then I give you another example. It's called the Euroscene in Leipzig. That's another typical post-1990 festival. And this time, Leipzig belongs to East Germany. East Germany did not have such an international event. I hear strange voices. What does it mean?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me, can you be more careful because we interfere the Thomas lecture, please?
I heard something like from a ghost that maybe we need I brought this mask. Oh, yes. It's like from Indonesian theater, and of course we need to look at masks now quite often. Yes. So again, back to the Eurocine Leipzig. Here is another pattern, very visible, that the former East Germany did not have such a festival for international exchange. So it was founded in 1991, and it's one of the main festivals in Germany with a special focus of exchange in Central Eastern Europe and Eastern Europe. Yeah, so it's very important. So it's it can be seen as one of the hubs where things exchange. Like maybe in the end you have the big festivals in Salzburg and Avignon, but there are also a number of new festivals, and not only in Germany, that take up the function of organizing the exchange in a on an international scale. So the oldest of those which are not in the West is the BITEF in Belgrade, which was founded in 1967. And this, of course, was the heyday of Yugoslav independence, and not to belong to either to the West nor to the Soviet system. And so they had the freedom and the liberty to create an international festival in their capital, in Belgrade. And BITEF is now, next to Avignon and Edinburgh, like the dinosaurs of international festivals in Europe. BITEF went through, as you can imagine, with the Yugoslav wars, through a number of crises, but still exists and is still important. And I think BITEF must be remembered, if we look at the history of festivals, as one of the great and most important foundations in this history of festivals. Then you have give you another example from Poland, the Malta Festival. It's not connected to the country of Malta, but it's a lake in the city of Potsdam. Therefore, it was called Malta Festival, and it's now the largest international festival in Poland. It started. That's also interesting and maybe very special. It started as a street festival, as a festival for street arts and street theater, but has now become a festival for, let's say, international experimental theater, and carefully curated by artistic directors that are appointed to do that job. So the Malta Festival I would also see as a sort of extraordinary example. Then also coming from the great change of 89 and 90. And let's see what happens in Poland with the Corona crisis. We don't know much. Of course, these festivals also do not take place. And another example, and that might be the last one, not to confuse you with too many examples, but another example from another country is the Nitra Festival in Slovakia, which was also founded in 1992. Again, you had the story of a newly founded country, even as Czech Republic and Slovakia, they separated, and then it was on the initiative of this Darina Karova to found an international festival for this new state of Slovakia and to inspire their own native theater culture, but also to make it a sort of hub and exchange for new theater from Eastern Middle Europe, Eastern Central Europe, Eastern countries like Russia, then the neighboring countries, of course, Hungary, very important for Mitra. And so we have all these festivals, and we hope that they will be kept alive. Hopefully, we won't see much this year from them. And but here's my next topic is actually how festivals, made replacement programs. Usually, they went online and offered some of their programming or some of their theater online. And I want to talk about this from the experience of this year's Theatertreffen now, for a number of minutes, because I think this is one very crucial issue. If we end up in a sort of digital replacement culture, or if we want to go on with the real theater. So we have watched the first digital edition of Theatertreffen. Theatertreffen usually is first 2 weeks of May. It was cancelled completely, but 6 out of 10 productions were presented via streaming. So you could see them, watch them, even accompanied by the discussions with artists and jury members, to be seen in these Zoom windows. So like almost like we have now. I don't know what you see, but I see, like at the moment I see like 4 windows. And so what was special, there was a live chat during performance. So it's like online commentary. So people have an exchange as if they, whisper to each other in the audience. So there was something technically new, but I think it was not so important for that. Then they had these discussions following, and some people here talked about a digital turn for theater. I think a digital turn is maybe is too much, and also it's not what one should, wish for. That theater becomes a digital medium, becomes a digital event. I think it was just, to save the festival from complete disappearance this year, and to make discussions possible. Those were the pros, in the discussion. It saved the festival and it made discussions possible. It showed some of the productions, more than half. By the way, they had a special agenda for this year's Theatertreffen, which was it was a decision, a resolution by the jury and by the Berliner Festspiele, 50% women directors, at least. And in fact, they had 6 out of 10 productions with women directors, so it was possible, to follow that rule. That was quite revolutionary when they announced it last year. But of course, this year the discussion was so much overshadowed by the crisis and Corona and so on, that this whole issue of gender participation or gender parts in theater culture did not play such a great role. Another great advantage, I would say, for this year's edition and this experiment with digital presentation was that it was open and free access. Unlike some film festivals, by comparison, that also started to go online, and then you would pay, for access to each individual film. The Theatertreffen was completely free. It was really free access. Uh, it was, I think, it was a good service uh, to the theater community in this moment. But what were the disadvantages or the contra is this? Of course, like we don't need to emphasize the fact that we see digital representation as a sort of replacement only. But here, this issue is connected with another important aspect, how the digital future will be evaluated, is that among other things, the aesthetics of presentation are often insufficient and boring.
Yes.
Yeah, insufficient and boring because it's like these people making these recordings from performances, they often have very little understanding of film, or they don't have the capacity, to work with several cameras. The most important thing is like this relation between the total and the detail. Yeah, and I think this is what became all the more visible in this Theatertreffen, this digital Theatertreffen, because like it was never, as condensed. Like it's like when you see one of these things, and quite often we have to do that for our work, to watch this kind of digital video. And but when you see a festival of that, then it becomes quite visible how insufficient the aesthetics of filming theater often are. There was one exception in the program of Theatertreffen. It was like by the Japanese auteur-director Toshiki Okada. So I've written this for you. Can you see this? So this Toshiki Okada, the vacuum cleaner from Munich Kammerspiele. And I gave you also the website. You might check to find at least some clips from that, because I thought in terms of aesthetics of presentation, they had some ideas how to improve this. Yeah. What did they do? It was quite simple. They worked with, actually what we have here in Skype, that you have the smaller window for the total, and you have the bigger picture for the details or for the close-up of the actors. Yeah, that already helps you to find orientation for the whole of a performance. The next step was, the next feature was even more striking, that they used some color bars around the images, and then they also introduced split screen, to make it more interesting for watching this performance. Split screen, and around the split screen they had some color bars, which means like just fields of color, but they were matching with the costumes. Yeah. So here you see the beginning of some aesthetics, of some new aesthetics for this digital theater. And I think theaters want to keep people, watching this. And now we are, after 4 months of streaming or 3 months of streaming, we're quite exhausted from seeing this. But there were some new ideas, and therefore I'm telling you, go to the website of the Münchner Kammerspiele. They even founded, they have like 3 stages, 3 venues, and they founded a 4th one, a digital stage number 4. And you should, they have a permanent website. There's not streaming every day, but they have things to offer. And I think this can be a good example how the aesthetics of presentation in this digital world changed a little bit, and as it was also maybe pushed by the Corona crisis. Yeah, because within the context of the festival, it was necessary to change, a few things about this presentation and filming. And apparently, it's not so difficult. It just needs a few simple inventions like these color bars matching the costumes, or to work in a more sophisticated way with split screen and windows on the display can help to make you watch theater on screen in a different way. So I recommend this also, like for maybe for the future, that we have like parts of festivals online. I think that might, with the development of this area of digital theater, it might become part of festivals in the future. Yeah, even when the real theater returns, that we all hope for, it might become a tool, another type of festival catalog that you have maybe in a better way. These digital theater, and that's not only the trailers that we can find on many websites of theaters. The trailers, they have their orientation maybe a little bit in the movie industry with their sophisticated trailers, but now I think we go away from this kind of aesthetics and find something that is, better suited for the representation, for the digital representation of theater. I must say I've worked myself for 20 years in the field of theater on television, so I could, see where the problems of that presentation were from the very beginning, but now we kind of entered a new age with this, and I think it was very well visible in the Theatertreffen edition, and maybe in other festivals as well. I also studied the cases of one of the most prestigious film festivals in Germany, which was the film festival of Oberhausen. Yeah, it's famous for experimental short film. So they had also everything online, but you needed to pay for it. It was no open access. It was difficult to find orientation. Of course, they have like a program of 200 individual pieces instead of 6 or 8. But nevertheless, you see how it is organized. Then, of course, there was also by now a radio play festival, which was organized by the Academy of Arts in Berlin. For radio play, the image is, of course, less important. But nevertheless, you want to bring people together. That's the idea of a festival. Yeah? So you really need to want to have as many opportunities for chats, for real exchange, for this artistic exchange, as it is one of the basic functions of festivals. And I see time is getting, I use my time up, but maybe I think most of you are maybe interested in this. What was the financial situation for German theater people?
Yes.
In this Corona crisis.
Exactly.
And I will give you like a short piece in written for this, what happened here in, let's say, late March, early April, but it holds true until now. As nobody could tell how long theaters would remain closed, financial matters became urgent from the very beginning. Politicians coined the shallow phrase of Sichtfahren, which means like I drive a car and I navigate only what I can see. So, as if they were cautiously maneuvering through thick fog, meaning decisions only for tomorrow or maybe next week, but certainly not for the near future. So that's one of the reasons that festivals were called off in the far distance, yeah, because people who were responsible for the rules and the application of rules said, no, we can plan in this situation of the pandemic, we can plan only for the next 2 weeks, not more. Everything beyond cannot be treated as being plannable. And I think this will also change in the future because it was like the first time for the field of culture. And I think, and I also know that it's different, there are great difference between individual countries where you live, but in general, I think the pattern for making decisions in, cultural planning will be maybe easier, but maybe not for the financial consequences of this pandemic. Okay, in this situation, I'm speaking about German theater again, it was up to artistic directors to handle future planning. So, as I said, not the politicians were in charge here, but the artistic directors to handle future planning and even more pressing, find out about compensation payments for actors not performing nor rehearsing. Here we have the social context. The difference in the system of employment became all the more visible. This has been certainly no problem for employed members of the state and municipal theaters, as they would continue to receive their regular payments. Another model would apply for the so-called subsidized private theaters like Schaubühne and Berliner Ensemble. So Schaubühne and Berliner Ensemble, both very famous theaters from Berlin, but there are no state theaters. That might be a surprise for some of you, but they are actually quite subsidized private enterprises. Schaubühne put their people very soon on the cost-cutting short-time work program with reduced wages, which is a tool in labor politics in many Western European countries. You don't get unemployed, but you get like a reduced wage, keeping your position. So I think this was for the first time ever this was introduced to theater. So because it's unknown. Either you have no job or you have a job. So theaters actually were forced to become quite flexible with that, but they also needed to be flexible to get the public benefits of, for example, such programs as short-time work programs. So the main goal was, to keep people with some income and or to get compensation for the income they lost during the crisis. Private and independent theaters living on much smaller budgets would have to find other ways that mostly meant for their freelance artists to get benefits from other sources. So they were not part of the economic structure of the theaters they worked in. They were like freelance artists. And of course they had to be, they had to find other sources or means of support. Another question was we have a lot of guest actors, so they are part of the German system. So people are not members of an ensemble, but they go there to one theater, maybe just for one performance. And that was also a question of how to compensate these people. Theaters like Deutsches Theater in Berlin, however, they have a long list of guest actors who faced severe losses in the long run. And I think this was in terms of how people felt, it was, as nobody could tell how long it would be, everything became unplannable. But there was some state support, and I'm talking about this now, and maybe that's very special for the German situation and how they treated that, and then was even more special for the Berlin situation, as you will see. So we live in a rough freelance culture for large parts of a deregulated public sector for many years now. But not only for theatres, but also academia, national public media, and similar institutions that don't follow the rules of regular employment anymore. Thus, the existence of very many people in the field of culture was at stake overnight. After the mid-March shocks, state government, and I'm speaking about the individual states of Germany. Yeah? So it consists of 15 states and the capital, the state of Bavaria, the state of Saxony, and so on and so on. So I'm not talking about the federal state, I'm talking about the individual states of Germany. So after the mid-March shock, state governments opened special funds to help people with instant cash. But this depended on where you live, Berlin being very different from Bavaria or North Rhine-Westphalia. In Berlin, however, people could apply for 5,000 euro in a surprisingly unbureaucratic way to make ends meet for the uncertain months to come. So I think as a rule of thumb, they said, okay, this is maybe for the next 3 months that you can survive with your family. 5,000 euro, it might sound like a big sum of money, but if you stretch it over not more than 3 months, then it's just the basic needs in a city like Berlin. But it was surprisingly unbureaucratic, as I said. Additionally, you could take loans up to 15,000 euros when you have a small company in the field of culture and media. So which means they wanted to prevent a total breakdown of this culture. In other states of the Federal Republic, this has been much more complicated, and also the funds for such programs varied significantly. Why Berlin with such generosity once known? That was a slogan from the late 90s as poor but sexy. So Berlin was not a rich city by comparison with other German cities. And the mayor said, we're poor but sexy. And it still sticks like a label. This German capital is certainly also the capital of freelancers in Germany. And these funds, this is how to understand this. These funds are not only meant to be a nice gift, but they keep up an economy that brings, among many other things, tax money into circulation and fuels the creative energy into institutions that have, as mentioned before, blocked off access to regular incomes for decades now. However, the badly needed money, rush money, has certainly helped many people to survive for the last 2 months and also to keep up the theatrical institutions. I think that was a main goal of cultural policy altogether, and it has been reached. It was not a complete breakdown. It was, maybe a sort of the beginning of a creative orientation towards other solutions. So there was like all the digital offerings, and it was also, and here I will end with my last example from the very beginning. As we talked about the Ruhr Festival, when this was cancelled, this was not only a matter of a long-term decision, but also a missed chance to reorganize theater in a different way in the huge venues of former mining pits and steel factories that have already seen innovative spatial organization by this festival. Hence, Christoph Marthaler, a sort of resident artist of Ruhr, very closely connected with the festival, which is led by Stephanie Karp, Marthaler criticized the hasty cancellation with the argument that they were very well prepared for the rules of social distancing among the audience and also on stage. So there was also a discussion if there were a certain degree of ignorance towards theater that theater people also complained about. Practically, we look into two areas of theater culture for getting back to performances. One will be the organization of actors and audience according to distance rules. And as a first, theaters are permitted to reopen way before the end of the season. They appear paradoxically quite unprepared for this. Like the first show in the big public theater in Germany was not real theater, but it was like a singer with a piano player. Yeah, so it was a program of this serious Liederabend, 19th century style. So just two people on stage, actually not a fact of drama theater, but something which is another replacement phenomenon, I would say. But this is the problem that theaters are working on right now. Either you have no suitable performances, yeah, so the existing performances that would be examined now for the distance rules, or you have no reasonable plans for reduced seating. Yeah. In most theaters, as they still are somehow designed, after the model of 19th and early 20th century theaters, the seating must be reduced, which means in many cases up to 60% and more. They just remove the chairs, yeah, and then you have like small clusters of seats. But this very issue is connected with the other field of decreasing ticket sales and less money to compensate all the losses. It's a kind of catch-22 spiraling down into the crisis after Corona. Yeah? So we will have another crisis, after the shutdown. We will have a crisis of reorganizing theater in a way that compensates, these reduced seating, for example, reduced ticket sales, and the problems at the box office. Will the catch-22 prevail in the future, in the next future? I believe, at least within Europe, where the border controls have been lifted 2 days or 3 days ago, the international exchange of theater will go on and catch up soon almost to the level it had before Corona. Actually, I'm no optimist at all, but in this case, I think the structural foundations of our cultural politics and what people in theater have done in the last 20 years, they ask for this kind of internationalization. And now I'm waiting for your questions. Thank you so far.
Thank you very much, Thomas. The first question is by Igor Potraikov, Macedonian playwright. So his first question is, what would Heiner Müller have said of this situation?
You know that one of his last scenes that he wrote in drama is from Germania 3. It's his very last play that he finished briefly before his death. And there's one scene, it's called War of Virus. War of Virus, I will show you. And it's a scene between a director and a playwright. And this was written in 1995, I'm telling you. But Müller somehow anticipated with this scene that something can happen that you have no valid idea that comes from historical experience for. Even the representation of the virus is impossible. And this is a short cabaret-like scene, War of the Virus. Actually, it's a dialogue between the playwright who has written the scene and the director who said, how can I show this on the stage? It's impossible. So if you ask me, so Müller in a way wrote something like that even before he died. And today, I don't know what he would say. It's a guess, making things. But of course, he would have some comments. And I think like what I can imagine, maybe to give it a try to answer your question, or to give you an idea what Müller may have thought, is of course that he sees this as a sort of signal for the crisis of globalization. That the capitalist globalization has overstretched itself in a way that something like an invisible virus can undermine the whole system. And of course, this has been unseen before. At least we know that there was this Spanish influenza, and after World War II, at the time when the Salzburg Festival was in the making. But I think what is very, very strange, and I asked myself this question quite often during the last weeks, is why there's almost no consciousness for this pandemic of the Spanish influenza after World War I. There's not much cultural memory for it. There's not much catastrophic memory, even though those were 50 million dead all over the world, and even in the United States it were like millions and millions, and there's almost no cultural memory for that. And I wonder why. So maybe there's even something in our memory systems that is not ready yet for digesting something like such a pandemic. But the phenomenon of the Spanish influenza from the 1919 and 1920, where so many million people died, that's something strange. So I recommend Müller, War of the Virus. I think there is an English title by himself. It was called Last Voyage, The Last Voyage, if you want to check for that.
Thank you, Thomas. Igor's second question is, you mentioned the Baroque, talking about the history of festivals. It is authoritarian way of thinking. Do you think there is something in common between Bertolt Brecht and Baroque way of thinking?
Okay. No, I was using this example because it was a flowering of such culture in Baroque period. Yeah, of course, you know that there were two main reasons behind this. One is, of course, it was for a very small group of people, kind of ruling class, if you want to apply the Marxist term of that time. But the flowering of that culture was also like driven, especially by the Catholic Church, that they want to prove that their culture is more valuable than the reformatory forces all over Europe, and they want to present it as a sort of celebration of richness and of allegories of the world that is made from God, but also a celebration of religious power as such. Therefore, we have most of the Baroque that survives today is in churches, of course. Yeah? But I wanted to remember this, history of festivals, because there was a very important step. We had this in antiquity and ancient Greece, not so much in Rome. It was, had a completely different form, but in ancient Greece, and we have like 1500 years, almost nothing. Uh, uh, and then only in Baroque and the Renaissance, there was a rediscovery of all the great traditions from before Christianity, but there was not the idea of festival was not ready yet. And I think it came with the festivities forth, and also that they developed a special sense of spectacle that was not there before. Yeah? Spectacle for the makers of the Baroque activities, but also for the participants as audience. And I think therefore the Baroque period is very special. It, I did not intend to make a connection with the authoritarian structures of Baroque society, right? But and Brecht, of course, to some extent, he comes from Baroque understanding. Uh, some of his plays even go back to this period. Like if you look at Mother Courage, so it's set in the 30-year war period, which of course has the backdrop of Baroque. And then if you look at Galileo, that's also like the late Renaissance, and the role of the church is very visible in this play. Of course, one cannot see this without politics, but for the, let's say, a genealogy of festival culture, one would have to include the Baroque culture. And therefore, I, again, recommend these books by Richard Alevi.
Mr. Dedic, theater maker, has a question.
Yeah.
Thank you for this lecture, as it was quite informative. I have one question in regards to the historical events, as you've mentioned that most festivals had an historical reference for their emerging, and since we have a similar global event, which was the Spanish flu, since we have a precedence for this historically in the past, what were or are there information of how cultural workers were handling this then, since this was not that long ago, historically speaking?
Yeah, as I said, it's a mystery to me that the Spanish flu, which was like one of the greatest historical phenomena next to the World War One, could be forgotten so easily. I think we have very, very little cultural memory of that. Yeah? So we know that some writers in America died of it, and that's like what we know. But there is very little literature or drama or maybe even later film. Now they digged up some historical reportage about it. And also there was some medical analysis how it could spread out. Like this was like the interest of how it could, affect so many people. Because like for America, and I have the background of American studies in the first place, so I looked it up. For the United States, it was the most devastating pandemic to this day, and there were like three factors. Like one was that people had bad hygienic conditions in the trenches of the battlefields in Europe. So they came back from there. They also had like the barracks and so on. So there was no distance at all. But the next thing, and that's very strange, and that is related actually to culture and even to festivities, and maybe even makes a link to our situation, that we want to bring people together with distance rules. But the worst thing for the Spanish flu in the United States was that they had these victory parades. People were, more concentrated than anywhere else in the streets and very close to one another. And I don't know, but it was not seen and analyzed back then. It was like it's our